to the Multiply Your Success podcast, where each week we help growth-minded entrepreneurs and franchise leaders take the next step in their expansion journey. I'm your host, Tom Dufour, CEO of Big Sky Franchise Team. And as we open today, I'm wondering if you have ever had to call in a favor to a supplier or vendor for your business. Or have you ever been on the receiving end of being asked to provide a favor? Well, in our episode today, Bew White, the founder and chief fishing officer at Summer Classics, shares with us his highs and lows of growing his national furniture company and how calling in some favors with some suppliers saved his company. Bew is the founder of Summer Classics Furniture Company. He's been named the Entrepreneur of the Year by the Society of International Business Fellows and the author of a Summer Classic listed in the show notes. So let's go ahead and jump into my interview with Bew White.
My name is William Bew White III. Is that too much information? I don't know. So I started a company called Summer Classics in 1987 after I was on the road selling as a sales rep, And then in 2008, I started working on getting into the indoor furniture business. The outdoor furniture business is called Summer Classics. And then the indoor furniture business is called Gabby. And it interested my son, and he got in. And so it opened in 2010, and then I have another company called Wendy Jane that my daughter started. And people might be interested in this because it's generally hard to work for your father, so or vice versa. And so people might find that interesting because I was really looking for succession. I was like, I don't know if I can. I don't want to sell this, but I may have to if I can't get the kids interested. So they got interested and excited to have them here, and they started their own company within the company, which they had something I never had, which was money, what I'm saying? Because I was always broke. One of my quotes I love is never run out of money. So I was always running out of money and watching my cash flow and making sure I didn't.
Yeah. Well, and so when your son and daughter started those enterprises, are those within your portfolio of brands, or or did they start their own brand? How did that work?
Yeah. Well, we have a holding company. It's called Gabriella White Corporation. It's named LLC. It's named after my mother, and so, but it doesn't. I mean, it's on everybody's paycheck, but it's the holding company, and we really did it for financial reasons. And the other companies are inside that. In fact, Wendy Jane is actually inside Gabby because we just didn't want to have too many brands in the business. So we actually had several brands that we got rid of. So these are the three lasting brands. I call it's probably modeled a little bit after Williams-Sonoma, but we have a wholesale division where we sell to dealers. We sell to customers. Like you live in Alpharetta, and so I'm sure we have several customers that have indoor furniture stores up there in Alpharetta. And then we have our own stores, and so and we have private label where we make product for other people, and then we have e-commerce, and then we have our own retail stores, and then our big business is selling to designers, decorators, and furniture stores.
Great. Well, and that's something that I'm really interested in speaking with you about here is this whole idea of distribution. And I've spent my career the last, at this point, over 18 years in the franchising business, helping companies franchise and certainly work in licensing and dealerships and so on. But the majority has been in franchising, and ultimately it's a method of distribution. And so I'd love for you to share your story. You have locations all over the country and distribution nationally. And I'd love for you to just talk a little bit about your growth and experience in doing that.
I think one of the main reason we got in the retail business is out of frustration, because our product is differentiated, and we were trying to get the basic patio shop, the patio stores. I think everybody probably in any kind of metropolis has a patio type furniture store in their area, and we had difficulty breaking into that part of the business because there were a lot of players that had been around for 50 or 100 years. And so we initially started selling people like Crate and Barrel and Williams Sonoma and Restoration Hardware and those, what I call the master retailers. And then they started asking us to take our name off of it. We're like, well, we're not going to have any brand. So we said the only way we're going to have a brand is to open our own stores. And we didn't know if it worked, so we tried it and it was extremely successful. We tried it obviously in the city we came from, which is Birmingham, Alabama. And we sold more in the first month than we'd sold in 5 years prior combined. So we're like, okay, well, this could be a model for us. And we started talking to people about licensing after that, because the model in furniture generally is licensing. So Lazy Boy and Ashley are big license stores. And so we picked up that model, and then I tried to get some dealers to pick up on it, but they're like, well, you have one store, you haven't really proven yourself. So we quickly opened another store in Raleigh, North Carolina, and then in Charlotte. And then we started rolling them out. And then all the first three, the Birmingham, Raleigh, and Charlotte, were all profitable. And then we opened three more really quick in Richmond, Atlanta, and San Antonio. None of those were profitable. I was like, okay, we got to figure this thing out. And so we were experimenting. So we had smaller stores. We had stores as small as 3,500 square feet and as large as like the Roswell, Atlanta store is 25,000 square feet. And as we experimented, we found, what worked best was probably somewhere between 8,000 and 12,000 square feet, depending on the price and location. And so we started getting people interested in opening, particularly when we opened Atlanta. So we opened a licensee in Louisville and St. Louis and Chicago area in Holland Park, which we kind of talked about. And then we started opening more stores really after the Great Recession happened. And this is kind of interesting that from the day I started the company in 1987, we doubled every 3.5 years up until the Great Recession, up until 2009, actually. So it was kind of I call it a roller coaster ride, but you're only going, when you go up to the top and you're going down, and it's like you're screaming with your hands up, going, that's how it felt, because you're going so fast. And people, I guess it had a lot to do with product. People wanted the product, but we couldn't figure out how to grow, how to morph into this new business that we're becoming really quick. So when you go from 1 million to 10 million to 20 million to 50 million to 100 million, all those require pretty dramatic changes. And I think you and I talked about this, is we've switched to EOS in, I think 2016, somewhere around there, 17. And that seemed to make a big difference in helping us get a little more organized.
Yeah. And for those that aren't listening in, or that'll tune into this, the EOS is the Entrepreneur Operating System that's put together, and that kind of helps provide. It really provides a framework just to help structure how you run the day-to-day operations of the business, and give some clarity on different components of the business for sure. What's interesting, that was a great visual, by the way, of this kind of roller coaster where you're riding up, you're doubling every 3.5 years, and then 08, 09 hit, and it's this giant.
Like, oh my God, you hit the bottom,
Right, and you're not screaming because you're having fun on the way down, right? What I really like, what's interesting with what you said here, Bew, is that you talked about getting into these retailers, oftentimes big box retailers. And I'll work with clients over the years, and I've worked with clients that are really, they view getting in with some of these large retailers or distribution companies or groups like Amazon or what have you for distribution, and don't realize oftentimes what happens is what you experienced, where your brand is kind of shoved to the wayside. They don't really care about your brand. They like your product, and now you're essentially either white labeling or private labeling, and you have you're now captive to their to their distribution or renewing purchases and buying new product from you. So talk about what kind of, I know you mentioned you made that decision, but when your team was thinking about it, what led you to say, all right, we're manufacturing, we're selling this, but we really need to get into the retail business. And they're two very different businesses to be operating in. So just curious how that conversation went internally.
Well, I have an MBA in mistakes. So this was a doozy that I made, and that's how I really got in the retail. It's kind of weird because you make a mistake and you pivot and you do something, and it put me in the retail. Ended up putting me in the retail business. And so we were selling Williams-Sonoma, and we got a really big order from them, and it was 10 truckloads. We never sold this much before. And we were making the product in Chile. A lot of people don't realize this, but NAFTA was originally signed with Chile in the 80s. And so we went down to Chile and started working with them on making product for us. We actually were already working with them, but this kind of made it even easier. And so we sold this large order of furniture. It was painted wooden furniture to Williams-Sonoma, and we were doing the painting here in Alabama. And so we had it perfected, and we were selling a lot of product, but not enough to handle this kind of thing. So I went down and worked with the paint company in Chile and got them to supply the paint. And lo and behold, they switched the paint on me from what I specified to save money. And I had a call. I shipped the 10 truckloads. Fortunately, the warehouse was in Memphis, so it wasn't that far away. And then I also shipped some other customers. And my Atlanta customer called me and said, well, I got your product and it's nice, but it rained this weekend. I was like, yeah, so? And he went, well, it's starting to peel already. I was like, oh my God. I wasn't worried about this guy because he bought, a few pieces, but I had these 10 truckloads out there. I was like, okay, what do I do? So I called Williams-Sonoma, recalled everything. Well, we were growing so fast, I had nowhere to put it. So we rented containers. You could rent, the containers that you get on ship lines. Now you could rent those for like $100 a month. So I rent them. I got a store out there, and I start over. In the meantime, Williams-Sonoma, I'm on the cover of the catalog, and they're selling the heck out of it. And I'm going like, just hold on. I'm going to start over. And I'm not going to trust Chile. I'm going to start over and do it myself. So even though it sounded disastrous, they didn't cancel any orders. They were selling the heck out of it, and I replaced it all. It took a long time. It took 90 days to do it, but I got it done. And then I had all this stuff sitting out on these containers. And so I decided I was just going to have to, I couldn't sell it to anybody. Nobody paid me anything that made any value. So I ran an ad in the newspaper, because this is before internet or, maybe fax machines is about all there was back then. So we ran an ad in the newspaper. Summer Classics opens a factory to the public. And man, I should have had the police there. It was like, I get to the plant and there's people everywhere. And we could only run on the weekend because we weren't open, during the week. We were making product during the week. So we did more in that weekend than we had done in Birmingham in the last 3 or 4 years combined. I was like, wow, this could be something. So we started running ads just for weekend sales of course, we needed the cash flow. And this was immediate cash. So we started every month, we'd run an ad, saying we're open for the weekend, come get it. Kind of like what Weekends Only does now, or The Dump, if you know who that is. And so it worked. And I was like, maybe we should just go in the retail business. And we outgrew the plant we were in. So we moved, but we owned the factory. So we said, well, let's just open a retail store here and see if it works. So we did, and it worked, and everybody got excited about the brand, and we started selling a regular product, not just closeouts, and that's what got me in the retail business.
Interesting. Well, I always think
story, but different.
Well, yeah, no. Well, I always find these stories interesting when you share that, because at the end of the day, when you start the business, you're a manufacturer and distributing through various avenues. And when you start your own distribution channel as a retailer, it is a very different business model, and you've made that transition and done it very successfully over the years and continue to grow. So I think it's really, really neat in how you've done that. And one of the things we talked about here before the show started, you talked a little bit about the 6 traits of entrepreneurship, and you were happy when you checked all those boxes. You were already an entrepreneur and checked those boxes. So I'd love for you to talk about those 6 traits, and maybe someone who listens in here, maybe they'll go through the list and see if they check them all as well.
Yeah, and what I found interesting is Gino Wickman, who also did EOS, who wrote this book, said, if you don't have all of these, don't even try. And I went, and I'm kind of getting through the first 3. I was like, okay, I got those. Okay, I hope I have these others. And I thought, well, I'm just fortunate I had these, because there are some of them. There's one in particular that a lot of people don't have, and you have to have it, and it's risk taker. And I go to Bible study every week, and the guy was talking about, he was giving us an analogy. He said, well, all these people they did a study on all these people that are 70 to 85 years old about the regrets in life. And the big one was, I didn't take enough risk. And I kind of raised my hand and went, I don't have that problem. It's like, I think maybe I took too many risks. But anyway, that's a big one for a lot of people. But they're visionary. In other words, you've got to see something in the future that other people don't see. Passionate, you got to feel really great about whatever you're doing. Driven, and this is one I have that's like keeps me up at night, and I don't particularly like it, but you got to be driven. You're looking at what you're trying to do, and you're thinking about it all the time, and you're so driven to get it done that you can't sleep. Responsible, which kind of goes without saying, and problem solver. Responsible would be like, you're going to pay your bills, you're going to do whatever it takes, and just be a responsible person. And then problem solver, which I think is a lot of what EOS is about, is you're solving problems and coming up with issues every week.
Yeah. No, I thank you for sharing those. Certainly they make a lot of sense to me as I see that and read this list. And most of my career has been spent working with entrepreneurs, successful entrepreneurs that have kind of, they're past that startup phase, right? They're, kind of as you've grown the business, you reach a certain point where you realize, we're probably not going out of business tomorrow, even though entrepreneurs oftentimes still have that fire, that concern of that.
That's a good fire.
Have that fire burning.
Yeah,
right.
You need that. That kind of makes you keep going. You're constantly I call it paranoia. You're paranoid all the time.
Yep. That's exactly right. Well, I think this would be a great time just to transition a little bit to the formula here. And we ask every guest the same 4 questions before they go. And the first question we ask every guest is, have you had a miss or 2 in your career and something you learned from it?
I've had a miss or 50. And I think probably the biggest miss was the 2008 recession. I didn't miss it, but I was already into the bank for $20 million. I was with Royal Bank of Scotland, and they were either the largest or second largest bank in the world at the time. I kind of thought I'd be with them forever, and then they started firing all the people I knew, and I was like, uh-oh. And so I kind of got into their target, and they started squeezing me back. This is 2008 and 2009. I was like, I'm going to go out of business. These guys are going to put me out of business, because they didn't like my space, and I didn't even know what that meant. What do you mean space? Well, people don't need your product. So I was like, well, God, that'd be a grocery store. That's very limiting, But anyway, it didn't matter. I had to figure it out. And what I ended up doing is calling my suppliers and saying, I don't know what to do. And one of my callers said, I said, you got any ideas? What can I do? Help me to give me wisdom. I prayed a lot about it, and they said, just don't pay us. I was like, wow, what do you mean, like ever? And they went, no, pay us, but just ride your payables. And so I ended up calling all of my all my large suppliers, anybody I was doing over $500,000 with, and all of them gave me at least 90 days, and some of them gave me the biggest ones, which came to close to $5 million, gave me, look, just pay us when you can. We believe in you. We're symbiotic. We need you. You need us. And so we're just going to let you ride us, and then don't stop paying us. Pay us whatever you can, whenever you can. And so it saved me. I made it through that period. I paid my line down in 9 months from 19.8 million to 2.7 million. So it was amazing that I was able to get through that.
That's incredible. What a story and what a journey. And also a testament, it sounds like, to the relationship you had established with your suppliers and vendors, because they're not going to offer that to you if there's not an already established, trusting relationship together.
Yeah. So I had made sure that I was close to all the CEOs of all the businesses that I was, that I did any significant business with. So it made a huge difference. It made a difference in whether I stayed in business or not. So, and I wrote a book about it, so because that, not just about that, but about all the trials and tribulations of having your own business and what you need to get through situations like that.
Sure. Well, and what's the name of the book, and give a few highlights here while we're talking about it, and we'll make sure we get that link in the show notes as well.
Yeah, it's a summer classic. Oddly enough, is the name of the book, the Bew White Story, and it just it opens with me in the hospital, and by the way, in Atlanta, in Piedmont Hospital. I was literally over there. I was like, there's something terribly wrong with me. And I drove to the hospital emergency room, and they admitted me with these blood clots in my lungs, and almost died. And then it jumps to college, where I meet my wife, who really went through some difficult times with me, and in the business particularly, and had faith in me, somewhat like my suppliers, and said, "You can do." I kept going, "I can't. This is crazy. I'm making $40,000 a year for 10 years. I just need to give up." And she would just go, "No, you don't. You can do this. I believe in you." And I was like, "Okay, she believes in me. Maybe I can." So I just keep going.
Well, that's a great spot to ask the next question, which is, has there been a make or two? You've shared some already here, but others that might stand out that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, I think getting past that 2008 or 9 recession, and then getting my kids in the business, I think was critical. Getting my son, I was like, man, I'm getting, I'm not. The way my mother would say it is, "You're not a spring chicken." I was like, okay, yeah. Of course, they kill chickens after about 4 months or 6 months. I was like, I hope I'm a little beyond a spring chicken. Anyway, she said that, and so I was thinking, man, I got to get my son in the business, and he had a great job with BASF, a huge chemical company. I was like, I really want you to come in. And then he got interested when I got in the indoor furniture business in what I was doing. He said, "Okay, if I can do this, I think I'll come in." So I got him in. Oddly enough, he and my daughter came in February of 2008, which was great because they couldn't quit. You couldn't change jobs because there were no jobs out there, and everybody's firing everybody. So they hung around in it, and William came out with a new company called Gabby, and it was a home run from day one. And I was like, wow, I can't believe this happening during the Great Recession. And I think it had a lot to do with nobody was opening new businesses in the Great Recession. So we opened this business. It's extremely successful. I think it's going to be bigger than Summer Classics within the next 3 or 4 years, maybe 5 at the most, but pretty quick because it plays in a bigger sandbox. And so then my daughter started one about 3 years ago, and that covers our accessories, which right now is pillows and rugs and lighting. So that's been very successful as well. So I think, being able to do that, have your kids working for you, which I know it's a trial for them, but I've kind of let them do their own thing and stay that. As long as they're successful, I kind of stay out of it.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and I like I like I like how you said there they came on right as the Great Recession was starting and coming into full force there, and they had nowhere to go. They became they had a couple years that they had to learn the business and make it go.
Yeah. And then they come out with it and it's like they're like going, wow, this is gonna work, and then they're excited. And they say now it's the best decision they ever made. So, and get this, my daughter was in New York trying to get on Saturday Night Live for 3 years being a comedian. And so she went into sales. And you can imagine, if you have this hilarious person working with you, you just love them. And so she was extremely successful in sales. And then she said, well, I want to come in and do my own thing. So she did. And that's worked out well too.
Oh, that's so fun. Well, let's talk about a multiplier or two that you've used in growing yourself personally or the business or professionally as you've grown the company over the many years.
Well, the multiplier is always people. And I know if you've worked in EOS, what is the thing that comes up almost every single time? It's the people. You're always talking about the people, and you're always trying to improve your people. So we are constantly in this upgrade mode to find better and better people. And every time we do, the business expands and we do better. So I think if there was one multiplier, that would be it. But I've had several along the way, which differentiation, which is hard for some people, but we're real creative. So we've been able to make product that's very unusual for outdoor. In fact, when people walk in our store, they'll get about halfway through and say, "Where's your outdoor furniture?" And then we'll go like, "Well, you just walk through it." And they're like, "This is outdoor furniture. You can put this stuff outside." And it does not look like what you think in your mind is outdoor furniture. So that's made a big difference. And then we design our own fabrics, and I knew it would make a big difference, but it does make a difference in the way the store looks, because when you're designing your own fabrics, and fabrics is a critical part of what we have on the product. So when you come in, that's mostly what you see is fabric. And since we design our own, it gives a store a unique look and feel. So I've got a ton of multipliers if you got all day.
Well, this has been great. I love what you've shared so far. And the final question that we ask every guest is, what does success mean to you?
Well, I think we talked about this, Tom. It's relationships. I think to me it was, and I kind of talked about the most important one is your creator, and then your spouse. I always say, happy wife, happy life, or amazing wife, amazing life. It can work in reverse, obviously. Husband doesn't rhyme with life, so I can't pull that one off. But that makes a huge difference. Your relationship, not just with your family, like we talked about, with your suppliers, but also your employees, and also your friends. And your friends, I have a great relationship with my friends, but boy, you got to work it. You got to call them. They're not going to call you necessarily. You got to put trips together with them. And I think the only, to be a friend, you have to have a friend, you have to be a friend. So I think that all those have been meaningful for me, and I really treasure my relationships.
Well, I think that's phenomenal with what you've shared. And as we bring this to a close here, is there anything you were hoping to share that you haven't had a chance to get across yet?
Yeah, on my book, this is kind of interesting. My roommate, I'm just thinking about it. My roommate in college is an actor, producer, director. He's the guy he has a couple of Emmys for Kids Are People Too. It was his show. And so when I finished it, he read it. He said, I want to do the Audible on this. So I said, okay, great. So he did the Audible, and I like Audible. I like when I'm reading. I'm driving a lot, so I like to listen to Audible. And the reader can make a huge difference if you're listening to Audible. You know that. And so he reads it, and he's crying in a couple of sections. So I called him. I said, his name's Michael Young. I said, Michael, you were crying. I said, in a couple of those sections there. Do you remember that? And he went, yeah, where was that? I was like, okay, you were acting. Because I thought he was being sincere, or no, he was obviously acting. But it's great to have him read it. And I think if somebody really was interested in an MBA in mistakes and how to avoid them, that would be a good way to listen to it.
Bew, thank you so much again for a fantastic interview, and I will second your comment about the audiobook narration being fantastic. I have not finished listening to the audio all the way, but the narration has been phenomenal. So let's go ahead and jump into today's 3 key takeaways. So takeaway number 1 is when Bew shared about his children joining the family business. And it's always one of those scenarios with kids joining the company can always be a little nerve-wracking and uncertain, but his kids sounds like it's gone very well and really are a great example of what entrepreneurship can be within your organization, whether it's with your kids or not, of how they started their own business lines and eventually created their own brand and product lines through the company. Takeaway number 2 is when Bew talked about this whole idea of when people are at the end of their life, that their biggest regrets have to do with not taking enough risks they wish they had, or they wish they should have, fill in the blank. And so I think that's just another great reminder. I'm sure you've probably heard that at some point, but it's a great talking point. And takeaway number 3 is when he talked about the miss, when he really was hit hard by the economic recession in 2008 and 2009. But it really wasn't what that miss was. It was the end product of that, which was that he ended up calling up his vendors and suppliers, and they worked with him on almost $20 million in payments owed to his suppliers, and they worked with him. I thought that was a great takeaway. And now it's time for today's win-win. So today's win-win comes from Bew's comment about what success means to him. And he said it in one word. It was relationships. And he talked about relationships with his creator, with his wife. And I think about the story he shared about the relationships with his suppliers. And when he had to call them and have that conversation about how he was going to pay them back, with not knowing how he was going to in a financial crisis at his company, all of his suppliers were ready and willing to work with him. And that only comes from having a positive working relationship with your suppliers. So to me, that's the key win-win takeaway. Make sure you're working with and developing relationships with those vendors and suppliers in your business. They're not just, don't view them as a commodity, view them as more of a strategic partner or an alliance or an ally with you. And that's the episode today, folks. Please make sure you subscribe to the podcast and give us a review. And remember, if you or anyone you know might be ready to franchise their business or take their franchise company to the next level, please connect with us at bigskyfranchiseteam.com. Thanks for tuning in, and we look forward to having you back next week.